I welcome everybody to the Wakefield District Consultation.
I'm afraid I can't hear you.
Could I welcome everybody to the Wakefield District Consultation Committee? I'm Councillor Alan Garbutt. Could people also introduce themselves?
I'm Councillor Charlie Keith. I'm from Wakefield Metropolitan District Council, Ward 21, which is Renthorpe and Outwood West. That just lies between on the border between Wakefield and Leeds.
I'm Dave Pearson, Director of Transport and Property Services at the Combined Authority.
I'm Peter Daniels. I'm the Chairman of Kirkburton Parish Council as a public member and also a member of the RMT Trade Union.
Hi everyone, Dwayne Wells, Head of Commercial for Harrogate, Yorkshire.
Hi everyone, Pete Byers from Northern.
Dave Hogg, Head of the Rail Group for Pontefract Civic Society.
Mark Bennett, General Manager at Harrogate, Yorkshire.
Can we move into agenda item 1 then, please? Open forum for the members of the public and ask for feedback, concerns.
You're a bit quiet again, Councillor Garbutt.
Say again.
You're a bit quiet again. You need your megaphone.
Right, I'll shout. Agenda item 1, members of the public to ask questions and feedback and concerns.
But can you just say that again? I've not got a copy of the agenda, unfortunately.
You haven't?
No, I've never received one.
Oh.
I think what it is, Alan, it's when you don't look at your microphone, when you look down,
Yeah.
you lose the effect of the benefit of
That's
your
fair enough, yeah.
tones.
So it's agenda item 1, members of the public to ask questions, feedback and concerns.
Can I come in first, Chair?
Yes, you can.
Right. So this is the first one is for the Northern Rail regarding the situation of the toilets at Kirkburton Station, which is still no further on. And I've done a survey actually with the members of the public, and we're of the opinion that it's not going to happen because it's been going on now for the best part of 3 or 4 years, and all we've got is a hole on the platform between platform 2 and 3, and there is no shelter at all for the members of the public waiting for the trains, and I think it's disgusting, to be honestly. Firstly, it's gone on this long. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'll have a go at while I've got the chance. Our chairman was supposed to appear on Radio Leeds as regards the cancellations and short services. He was due on Radio Leeds and he got cancelled, and they had a chap from Harrogate on instead, and the programme was supposed to cover West Yorkshire. We understand that Northern are stretched at the moment and they're making cuts, but what we're frightened of is the power and influence of all people to do with Harrogate and them not cutting services in Harrogate and cutting everybody else's even more. Could people give us an assurance that this isn't going to happen and that everybody gets the fair share of a restricted service?
Anybody like to comment on that?
You want me to come on there, Chair? Yes, I can. In all truth, the cuts are across the piece and across the north, and Harrogate is included in that, and we're making them for the reasons as you mentioned, our resources are constrained, so we're running a more limited service that addresses the market that has changed, but also enables us to run a reliable service. And so we're not envisaging putting those services back until we can actually put them back. and then they will be returned and operated reliably.
Yeah, I think you've missed my point a bit. As I say, I understand about the cuts. As I say, we're just a bit Harrogate paranoid about their lobbying power. And, you know, as I say, we just want fair play. That was my point.
No, I understand that. And in truth, there's lobbying from all over the place, as you can imagine.
Well, that's our job, isn't it? We're all doing our job, but
of course you are, and there's nowhere louder than anywhere else, if I'm honest. And there's no intention to favour or not Harrogate, I can assure you.
Charlie?
Yeah, Alan, I know I'm speaking as a councillor, and I know it's you said for members of the public, but I am also one of them. I'm privy to the information, and you will as well. I've seen the email from Matthew Morley this morning about the further cuts and alterations to services proposed by Arriva to come in April. And I guess this comes to the same point of what we've just been saying, is that I think what the gentleman from Pontefract, what I took from the gentleman from Pontefract, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, it was the fact that we don't want to be people who are going to concentrate on services that are profitable. Everybody deserves a service, and this is where my big point is that operators that run a business are concentrating on running that business and sustainable business by running some of the more profitable routes, and some of the less profitable routes will be the one that goes to the wall. And so this is the age-old conflict between running a business and providing a public service. And I think the pandemic has highlighted these. It's double underlined it by having shortages of labour, etc., etc. But we're all in the same boat. And what I think the gentleman from Pontefract was saying, and what I'm saying is, I'm concerned about further cuts and the long-term impact on us providing public transport as an alternative to using your car.
Chair, it's probably useful if I come in on this sort of general point, and it applies on the rail and on the bus. And I think it's as Councillor Keith said, really insensate. The current situation is quite unusual, and it is due to a lot of impacts on the public transport network that we're seeing. The loss of fare revenue coming from the pandemic, the resulting labour shortages in both industries and in many industries, and now we're dealing with increased fuel costs as well. So all of these things are sort of creating the situation where there's a shrinkage of services at the moment, and a need for us to manage our way through the current difficulties and crisis, so that we create a viable public transport network for the future, and one which people can use with confidence. And we are finding with bus operators and with rail operators the need for services to be reduced, but hopefully on a temporary basis. And we do need to identify and understand and work with everybody to bring services back to a viable and sustainable form going forward. And I think the point that Councillor Keith's making to us as officers, but also as colleagues that work closely with the train companies and the bus companies, that we shouldn't let that just be a survival of the fittest type of arrangement, where only the very profitable things survive and the more marginal things don't, because often both on buses and on trains, some of the marginal services are the ones that people who don't have alternatives rely on. So and I think that's an absolutely fair call. We at the Combined Authority are working with bus operators in particular, to sort of manage our way through this this situation. I'll let Dwayne from Arriva and Mark from Arriva speak to their particular company issues. But we absolutely want to protect the interest of the passenger in this, but also to understand all the trials and challenges that the current economic climate's giving us. So it's going to be a difficult year. This, in some respects, more challenging than the last 2 years of the pandemic, because it's not quite as simple as the pandemic was. This, and there's no clear way through it. But I think as Pete's sort of identified, there's a desire to put things back, and we're working towards that. But neither can we make complete promises about when and how.
I think the worry is that everybody has these temporary solutions become permanent.
And that's absolutely, that is absolutely the worry. And I think that's the thing we need to keep in mind. And you may have seen that the Mayor of West Yorkshire speaking about the rail service reductions, and similar on bus, that we can't let this be the new normal. We've got to actually put some of these things back.
Can I come in, Chair, please, if you don't mind?
Yes, of course. No problem.
I mentioned about the situation on Kirkburton Station, which I've not had a reply as yet. But generally, when it comes to public transport, having worked in the public transport industry for nearly 60 years and still do it now only voluntary, I've seen a lot of changes, hell of a lot of changes, especially on the railway industry when I started there in 1961. But the problem you've got is that once you get people into the cars, you cannot get them back onto public transport. And the running down of the buses, especially where I live in Kirkburton, is absolutely appalling. And what annoys us is that I know people are going to say that when it comes to consultation, when they come to change the buses, a lot of the times the people don't get in contact with the right people, i.e. the local parish councillors. And the local parish councils, they're the people that's got the bid on it. And then you'll say we've got district councillors, but unfortunately, the 3 district councillors in our area, I've got no time for, because they're not doing a very good job. But the thing is that once you get them off the buses and the trains, you'll not get them back. And then we get more and more pollution and more problems with the traffic, and it just has a knock-on effect. But again, I just want to make sure, so Mr. Mears, is it regarding the situation at Kirkburton Station, because I'm very, very disappointed. Thank you. But I've got to get my morning answer.
Was that the waiting rooms?
Yeah, no, the toilets. They're supposed to
the waiting room.
At Kirkburton Station, it was agreed many years ago that toilets would be put in there. The council agreed to it. It was all on the headlines about our past MP, and there's I did more work than what she did on it, by the way, because I've been prested in them for a long, long time. But there's no toilets and there's no waiting room or area on platform 2 or 3, and it's wrong. Thank you
for that. Yep. Any further questions?
Alan, as a supplementary on that Kirkburton Station situation, I remember catching trains there with my mother and what have you, and the subway used to be the gentleman's toilet, and it used to smell horrifically. I went down there when they'd altered all these, and that gentleman's right. We were promised a state-of-the-art, lovely station, and all we've got is somewhere, from what I can see, it's basically cosmetic makeover.
Chair, I don't know the answer to the as to whether or not a toilet was planned in the original scheme. But I'll if we can take a note of it, and we'll come back and clarify, because it probably goes back a couple of years now in terms of what was and what wasn't. But I think the point's well made. There is no toilet, and you feel there should be. So I think we understand that point.
Will do.
Any further questions? We'll move on to item 2, apologies for absence.
I think this might be a funny one, as people may have had problems, trying to get into the call. So I can try and follow that up after the meeting.
That's fine. We'll move on then to declarations of disposable pecuniary interest, only for transport members at committee. Any hands up? No.
Is that now?
I'm
Yes,
on the Transport West Yorkshire Combined Authority Transport Committee. Is that what you want me to do? Yeah, so declare that.
I don't think that's declarable, because obviously this is a combined authority meeting, but it's useful to know.
Yeah, you're our member for the Transport Committee, Councillor
Keith.
Keith. We're trying to call you your first name the other way around.
Charlie, I know. It's
Councillor
often
Charlie.
that has been a problem. Item 4 then, Jeanette. Exempts information, possibly excluding the press and public.
No, there aren't any.
So item 5 is notes of the informal meeting, 14th of October 2021.
So they were for information, because it was an informal meeting, so they're not minutes.
We're just noting.
We're just noting them.
Yeah.
If anyone wants me to make any amendments, I can do, but they're for noting.
Item 6 and Transport Committee review, subject to approval by Combined Authority.
Thanks, Chair. I'll explain what this is about. The Transport Committee has been in operation in its more or less its current form since 2014, when the Combined Authority was formed, and in some respects, the Transport Committee was a carryover from the previous Integrated Transport Authority main committee. So the Transport Committee hasn't really been looked at in terms of how it operates for some time. And so the Combined Authority back in June last year commissioned a review of the Transport Committee and these subcommittees as well, and the various roles on the Transport Committee. The outcome of that review was presented back to the Combined Authority last week on Thursday, and the Combined Authority meeting agreed a number of changes to roles and to the role of these meetings as well. One of the things we did with these meetings a year or two ago, I think 2 years ago now, is we did ask the participants of the meetings, public members as well as the elected members, what works and what doesn't work and how we might move them forward. And I think one of the things that people found was that the meetings were a little bit sort of cumbersome in terms of how they function. They're both formal meetings and public meetings. And so what's been decided is that from June onwards, the new municipal year, then for Wakefield and each of the other districts, there will be a district engagement member. So one of the members of the Transport Committee will take the role of being a sort of lead member for Wakefield, and we will still have consultation and engagement meetings, but there won't be formal constituted committees, and that allows a little bit more informality and flexibility around how these meetings will work. So we'll still have the opportunity for transport issues to be discussed and for people to raise transport issues back through the meetings, but we'll do that in the format of an informal meeting, which is more of a sort of open forum, and the district member who lead can, if it works for the district, then they can adapt the meetings to suit what people in the district want. And if it's appropriate to do something on a theme basis, so something around rail services or bus services or active travel, then or anything like that, then they can have specific meetings set up to discuss specific themes and issues. So a bit of reassurance that this form of meeting will still continue, but the structure of the meeting might change. We won't necessarily have a district consultation subcommittee as a formal committee, but we will have a combined authority transport committee engagement meetings going forward.
Thank you for that. The chair's update is item number 7. I wish I could have something good to say, but it's cut. But I do appreciate the temporary shuttle to connect Thamesworth with South Ealing and Rye Hill to connect with the 3 evening services now terminating at Rye Hill. It would be nice to think that could become a permanent thing.
Well, that's an interesting little thing, actually, because that came about because some evening services were being reduced by Riva, and we wanted to keep some later evening links into those villages from Hemsworth, and so we commissioned that from a taxi, which is the first time we've done something like that. So it'd be really probably early days at the moment, but it'd be really interesting to see what the take-up of that is, because that might be something we want to do more of in the future. That buses to main towns and then sort of shared taxis to take people for their final onward journey. So it's a bit of an experiment that. We'll see how we get on. And given what we were saying earlier about the challenging times for services, we are going to have to be innovative. We're going to have to do things differently to how we've done them before.
Thank you for that.
I think, Alan, that what you're talking about there, that little service there, is indicative of how we're going to have to look in terms of restructuring here, because the current system, as the gentleman from Tridleston said, isn't working and isn't working properly. People will still need to get about. We live in times when price of petrol will be one of the drivers that people will come back to public transport and the public demand to still be able to be connected. And connecting the local communities together is sometimes what's been overlooked. I quote the case of Kirkburton Gate that used to have a bus runs through Renthorpe where the dentists and the doctors were, etc., and then running to Wakefield, and they changed that into a bus that whizzed you into Wakefield in 10 minutes. The fact that you didn't want to go into Wakefield was not the point. They whizzed you into Wakefield and you had to come out on a spoke and hub system to get to a village that's a mile away or a mile and a half away. You had to go into Wakefield and come out on a different spoke. So I think what we've got to do here, this is an opportunity and not an epilogue. I think the new normal has got to be thought about. But one of the big things that I do think that we've got to look at here, and the gentleman from Northern Rail pointed out to it, my concern is the training and the staffing of this. Because if we don't put some time and effort into making sure that we've got properly trained, properly remunerated people to drive the buses and the trains, we can come up with schemes all we want, but there's going to be a shortfall. And we've seen this in police, in education, in various different things, and in doctors in particular. There's been nobody training up and putting people on one end of the conveyor belt, so that at the other end, when people come to retire or move on or change their jobs, there's an absolute dearth of people with the capability to provide the service. That's my main concern there as well.
Thank you. Move on to item agenda 8, information report.
Thanks. this report sort of links through to the Transport Committee papers as well. So hopefully the members who've sort of done that and looked through, they'll see them there. I'm happy to talk to any aspect of things on there. We also had some the local issues around there. We explained a bit about the bus service changes that happened at the end of February and the action taken, and it was the taxi arrangement was part of that as well, although I don't think we mentioned that on the report. And the Horsefest Streets for People scheme, which is a joint council and combined authority scheme to look at creating a more healthy street environment around Horsefair in Pontefract. So yeah, this is probably the slot on the agenda where I can I'll answer any questions anybody's got from any of the papers that you've seen.
Anybody want to ask any questions? Can't see any hands going up.
Okay.
Looks like you've
got an easy one.
We'll move on to agenda item 9, operators updates.
Yeah, it's really worth sort of bringing the rail operators and the bus operators in one by one, really, in terms of how these work.
Shall I go first, Chair, from the bus perspective? Yep.
Thank you, Dwayne.
Thanks, everyone. So, as has been mentioned, bus companies across West Yorkshire have suffered from a UK-wide driver shortage over recent months, and that has resulted in some last-minute cancellations. Clearly, buses not turning up because of these cancellations goes completely against our service standards and what passengers rightly expect from us. And so, as has been mentioned, we're making some temporary changes to our bus timetables in Yorkshire from the 25th of April. And these are going to be published on our website tomorrow. Some services across Wakefield District will have a reduced Monday to Saturday timetable. Some will have a reduced service on a Saturday only, and some will have their Saturday service temporarily suspended. Now, these changes are temporary, and just to answer the previous point, haven't been made for commercial gain. I think once the details become clear, that will be obvious. Profitable routes and marginal routes have all been reduced proportionately, and we think this is the least disruptive option available to us to manage our way through the current crisis. The changes should mean that we will have enough drivers to operate the published timetable, and that will in turn minimise disruption. But nonetheless, the work doesn't stop there. We'll be continuing behind the scenes to recruit new drivers to help us restore our services back to previous levels. Just in terms of the recruitment piece, our activity so far to attract new drivers includes an intensive recruitment campaign, both on social media and adverts on our buses, to encourage people to be a bus driver. Working with the DVLA to fast track provisional licence applications to increase the number of trainees in our school. Temporarily increasing our starter rate for existing PCV licence holders. Excuse me, my light's on a sensor. To a higher rate of pay. And we've launched together with the Bus Alliance a new website, West Yorkshire Bus Jobs, which details all the vacancies that we have available. I think final point, as part of this, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank our existing drivers who continue to work extremely hard in very challenging circumstances to run the level of service that we do today. Their dedication is exemplary, and we'd like to thank them for their continued efforts as we work through. And as I say, more details will be made available on our website tomorrow in terms of what those new timetables look like, and I must stress they are temporary. That's the update from Arriva. Happy to take any questions.
You could ask what your current sickness levels are. Are they very high?
We are suffering from COVID related sickness. Mark, I don't know whether you have more of a number that you could share with the group.
Yeah, I think it's within sort of typically expected regions of sort of 3.5% as usually the budgeted for base rate of sickness. But as you've said, we do get some fluctuations around surges in COVID. I think the only other point I'd add to what Dwayne has said so far, we work tirelessly not just to recruit staff, but to keep hold of the existing staff that we have. And that means adapting shift patterns. It means consulting with them to understand what matters to them about the duty contents, about the shift patterns, etc., and trying to deliver something that's that in a way allows us to deliver the services that we advertise, but in a way that's suitable for our staff as well. We're conscious that right at the start of the easing of restrictions, when the lockdown was lifted, we saw a surge of people, like many other operators, leave to go to the HGV industry. And indeed, because we've demonstrated now that we're starting to work in a way that's alongside our staff, a number of staff that left to go to the HGV industry have come back to us now. So there are some hopeful signs there that not just recruiting more staff, but the work that we're doing to keep hold of existing staff is beginning to pay dividends for us as well.
Thank you for that. I think it's interesting to say that some are returning back from HGVs. That's interesting.
Alan, we also need to thank the staff as well, but also I appreciate what's just been said about the retainment of the existing staff and how they are altering shift patterns and making it more applicable. We live in these times that we do. We've seen this week the appalling way staff have been treated. All right, it's in a different part of the industry, but it's still moving people about. It's still covered by the RMT. The decision by P&O, which was absolutely appalling. It's good to see that Arriva are concentrating on looking after the staff, which is actually one of their biggest assets that they have in that company. And I'd like you to pass on our thanks to them. Thank you.
I think I should add as well, over and above that, not just that, Councillor Keith, but myself and many of my colleagues across Arriva Yorkshire, we're not the kind of management team to hide away in a tower. We do go out on the front line, including me, myself, keep my PSV licence up to date, and we drive buses ourselves. So I think what that does is allow us to get a sense of what the travelling public have to put up with, and at the same time seeing for ourselves what challenges our staff face.
Could I just ask, and it's purely a personal curiosity question, I see more and more lady drivers. Could you give me what percentage of your drivers now are female? I'm just curious.
I think it varies by depot, really. I think across the whole company, I'd say just under probably 10% is probably not far away from the mark. I think what we are also doing, we're also exploring recruiting part-time drivers, because not just altering shift patterns, we're looking at the type of vacancy that we offer and what's attractive to people. So rather than just opening our vacancies to the current existing labour market, we're trying to widen the net and possibly people who maybe single parents, may have got young children that are able to work between school times, may be able to work evenings only. So we are exploring other opportunities as well, and we're always very mindful of equality and diversity within our workforce.
Thank you. Any further questions? Have we any further updates?
Is it worth inviting our rail colleagues to speak as well?
Yes.
Gladly. Shall I take first one, Chair? Okay. For Northern, I very similar to our bus colleagues, if I'm honest. Our resources are our issue, but for a different reason, I think, to those seen in the bus industry. We don't have a shortage of drivers. We've got plenty of drivers, and they're all working very hard. But what we have is a shortage of drivers who've completed their full training. And the reason that has happened is right back at the beginning of the pandemic, social distancing was important, very important. And in the driver's cab, you can't socially distance. So there was a period of about 9 months when we didn't do any training at all. Thanks to the efforts of the trades unions, must be said, and our own people, we found a way through this. And early on in the pandemic, about a year ago, these people were absolute heroes because they were testing twice a day and forming training bubbles and all these other things you have to do, or you had to do then, which was a real issue. And no one really tested at that point, and these people were, and it wasn't very pleasant, but they did, and training started, and we started getting people trained. And then obviously as the situation eased, so training increased, and we made hay while the sun shone last year, and continue to do so. But it's an ongoing battle, and it's a combination of training new drivers, which takes about 18 months to train from the street to driving a train in anger, but also existing train crew, because as they move around depots and change jobs, so they've got to be familiar with the trains they drive and the routes they drive over, and that work carries on, but the backlog is there. Those 9 months did happen, or rather didn't happen. And we're sitting at tens of thousands of hours of training out of West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire, our big depots there. So that is an issue, and that is why the timetable is as it is. We've put a restricted timetable in for the summer, but it's important to realise also that the market's changed as well. So whereas commuting was very much what Northern was about a few years ago, the commuting part of the market is only 40% of what it was, but the leisure market is terrific. And we're now carrying 85% of the numbers we carried prior to the pandemic starting, but on a weekend, well over 100%. So there are more people traveling, but most of them for leisure. At the moment, or a couple of weeks ago, leisure was going into Leeds and Sheffield and Meadowhall and places like that, shopping. It's morphing now though, and people are going to the Dales and the coast, and the timetable this summer will make sure it meets that changed market. So that's really important. And that carries on. I will. It would not be fair of me not to mention the shelter and the toilets at Wakefield Kirkgate. It's difficult for me to do this without sounding like Jobsworth or like I don't care, because I absolutely do care. But it isn't our project. It is a project between Network Rail and our friends from Grand Central. But I will pass on the comments said today because it's our station, so it's our problem. And let me pass that on. We are making our voice felt, and we're making the voice of our customers felt as well, because this isn't the only place I get this feedback, and it's absolutely right. You're absolutely right. We've been through another winter without an adequate shelter, which is not good enough. It really isn't. We've talked about resources. Performance is fairly good. We've suffered some short-term cancellations, but these are based around the resource issue, and the big judge of whether we've got this timetable right is with these cancellation figures will improve. But as with my friend Dwayne from Arriva, I do emphasize these are short-term changes, and the timetable will come back when we've got the resources to enable it to do so. Happy to take any questions anyone may have.
Could I ask what your plans are for the reunification of Neville Hill? How you plan to utilise the extra workforce? Are you doing more overhauls and more work in-house and things? I'm just curious as to what you're going to do, because you've doubled the size of your sheds and pretty much doubled the size of your workforce.
Absolutely have, and it was a terrific thing to do, because Neville Hill, I always say this, but Neville Hill, for those who don't know, is a depot just east of Leeds. It's so important. It's so, when it goes wrong, the entire region suffers from it, because getting trains in and out of Neville Hill is always tricky. But Neville Hill, at the moment, we're carrying on as we were, because they do a lot of third-party work there, which carries on. So we do a lot of work for LNER and for cross-country maintenance of the heavy trains that you'll see in there as you go past. But gradually that will morph, and those people, we all work for the same company now, which is terrific, and those engineers are really good people. What I can see happening there, and this is in the future, but it's not that far in the future, what something called Transpennine Route Upgrade will bring is a remodeling of the lines around Neville Hill, which will give us more space. And I can see us opening, and it's a long way ahead and not budgeted for yet, but I can see us opening a training school there for engineers and things like that, to get young people into this industry, because it is tricky to get engineers, people, and we want to make it a nice place to work. So a lot of work around that. It was an exciting thing. I was there the day it came in, and it was all really good. We've started working together. But at the moment, they've still got those contracts to deliver, so we don't want to lose those, and they're important. But we're finding efficiencies already. Get trains easier up into Leeds Station, because we've got more shunt drivers than we would have had normally, because we've got twice as many as we would have had normally. So it's all helping.
Do you envisage parity in terms and conditions long term, or are you still leaving them separate?
Well, they are on separate terms and conditions,
yeah.
and so lots of one of the issues of the fragmented rail industry is you tend to get that happen. We've got it with our train crew, each side of the Pennines. Yes is the answer if we can come to an agreement, but it will be a matter of negotiation. We wouldn't. People are entitled to their terms and conditions as they agreed them, and they carry on until we can find a common ground where we can. But it's far more efficient if we can, and it would certainly what we would prefer.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any further comments?
Can I just make one comment, Chair, regarding the industrial relations in the railway industry and training? I started as a messenger on the railways in 1961, and when I actually took early retirement, I was an operations manager who worked my way up through the ranks, which you did do in those days. And yet the way of learning on that, especially on the railway industry, was not mainly going to college or stuff like that, was actually watching somebody do the job and then do it yourself. Now, I worked in the freight sector nearly all my working life and did just about every job that we're going. And I was also a trade union official, but we had a very good working relationships with the train operating companies until later on in life, which did annoy a lot of us. And I'm not getting at anybody personally, was that I classed myself as a career railwayman. The only job I ever did was work on the railways. And we worked our way up. But when you used to bring people in halfway up the run, and they got no idea of how to run the railway. And the most important thing on the railway industry was not actually the running the train, it was the staff that worked in the industry. And you'll find, especially probably in the bus industry, that a lot of staff were loyal staff. They came on when they were arcade with a 15-year-old, and I worked right, well, I still do it now, but I work on the steam charters. You're there for life, sort of thing. It's and it sometimes it does annoy me that the way some people come into the industry trying to tell us how to do a job that we've been doing for 25 years, which I think sometimes it's wrong at times. But that's all I've got to say. Yeah, thank you very much.
Could I'm sorry we're going on, but could I just confirm that, because after privatisation, experience was frowned upon, and they tried to change the culture, and they brought managers in with no rail experience at all, and the general workers had to carry them and tell them what to do, and it's ludicrous. And I hope that's one thing that Northern Rail will change, at Neville Hill with the other side, because there's managers there who had never worked on a railway before, and to put them as a shift manager, to me, is just idiotic. I cannot stress that enough. And I hope they'll change and promote people who actually know the job inside out and care about the job, rather than just career hoppers who don't. Right, well, shut up now.
Can I just come in? I can tell you quite a number of stories when we have these people coming up telling us what to do. And I used to say, well, all right, we'll do it. And then I said, what's happened? I said, well, we're that late, the train driver's bailed out now, so we can't run the train. End of story.
Right, just one more.
One more.
I'm sorry, but I've got to say this. They had a manager in who thought that they had different gauges throughout the different regions, and that the gauge was adjustable, and that is the gospel truth. So there's no hope, is there? Let's be honest.
Thank you for that. Have I missed anybody, Dave, on updates on operators?
So I don't think so. I think we're all good. I'll take the next two items. So these are presentations. So, but I promise I won't bore you with them. But if you just bear with me, I'll try and get them up on the screen. Can you see that?
Yes.
Right, great. Okay. Right. What I wanted to do is just to give you some updates on some live things that are happening, and some things that we can expect to see over the coming weeks and months. We will share these slides, so you don't have to read every line, because they're quite busy slides. So, but we just thought it useful just to give you a bit of a broader update on things. We'll start off with buses and bus service improvement plan. About a year or so ago, the government introduced its national bus strategy, and made some money available for enhancing and improving the bus service, and it asked all local transport authorities, including West Yorkshire Combined Authority, to submit what it calls a bus service improvement plan by the end of October, which we duly did, and we're waiting to hear from the Department for Transport on whether or not we've been successful in getting funding. If we are successful, then the slide sort of details some of the things which we plan to do in the short and medium term to improve bus services. Clearly, we have heard this afternoon, about some of the stresses in the system in terms of drivers, in terms of some of the difficulties that Riva and Wayne has talked us through, but it's also been said, I think, by one or two people, and we'll touch on this a little bit further, that we do need to actually make the bus attractive. We need to get people out of cars. The need to do this with the climate emergency is ever greater, and with fuel prices going up, we do need to have a viable alternative for people to use the car. So hopefully we will be successful in getting some funding, and the bus service improvement plan, which we published back in October, will be the plan we work towards doing that. And obviously we'll keep people in Wakefield updated with that. Alongside that, you probably, most of you will be aware that when the mayor was elected, she was elected on the pledge to bring buses back into public control. And I think one of the first stages of doing that is the enhanced partnership, which is it's still a deregulated environment, but the enhanced partnership gives us a structure by which bus companies, the Combined Authority, Wakefield Council, and other bus companies can collaborate together. And so, enhanced partnership is a formal legal thing. We have been through a process of consultation engagement, and we we got final approval to enter into a partnership from the Combined Authority last week, and so that's one definite step forward in terms of bringing buses back into public control. So sorry, let's skip forward a bit. Alongside that, we are looking at whether or not franchising is an appropriate way to ultimately to do that. And back in June last year, the Combined Authority approved a process to do what's called an assessment of franchising, and there's a very definite legal process to this. And that looks at whether or not there's a case for adopting powers whereby all bus services are specified by the Combined Authority's Transport Authority, and all bus services run as contractors rather than as independent businesses, and the revenue risk and costs are borne by the Combined Authority. So there's a number of steps to go through, and we've just entered the first step in terms of looking at an assessment of that. And that's what we call the twin track approach. We're working in partnership with bus companies, but also looking at whether or not franchising is a viable alternative approach. And obviously we do this in a period of quite radical change in terms of the demand for bus services. The financing of bus services has taken a bit of a blow through the pandemic. The labour force issues, which we've already discussed, are challenges. Those labour force issues drive up the cost of operating buses, as does the fuel crisis at the moment. We also have obviously the cost of living crisis in terms of people's ability to afford bus fares as well. So it's a very complex sort of environment we're doing this in, but we are looking at whether or not bus franchising is the option to adopt. Manchester are about 2 or 3 years downstream from West Yorkshire in this regard, and have made the first steps towards franchising, whereas what we're doing here is we're pulling together all the options, and then in 2023 the mayor, because it is a mayoral power, will decide whether or not to push forward on that. Just moving on to rail, one of the other things that is very live is lots of changes around the structure of the railways, the commercial viability of the railways is a similar way to bus, and what we do need to do is to look at what should be the strategy for West Yorkshire, and so we can to develop a strategy that we can then engage with the new Great British Rail and a Network Rail in terms of the of delivering a rail vision that everybody in the region signs up to. So we're embarking on a process of developing this rail strategy. The high level principles we're looking at is capacity, because although as Pete says, demand has been different in the last couple of years, we still have some trains that are pretty full, and we still do need the capacity to grow in terms of train size and length, in terms of service frequencies as well. We obviously want to enhance the passenger experience, and address some of what it says here, the disparity in the current rail service offer. And I think colleague from Pontefract and the Five Towns area will identify the fact that not all areas of West Yorkshire are equally served by rail. Some areas are poorly served compared with others, and I think we want to try and have a strategy that actually tries to address that balance. Integration between rail and other modes of transport, absolutely key if we're going to provide a sustainable transport network rather than a fragmented system. And decarbonisation is a key issue. and that those are the big blocks on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, some of the work we need to commission and to do to be able to deliver on that. So that's a sort of where we're developing this rail strategy, which we'll engage with the Transport Committee and through the Transport Committee with yourselves. We can't really have this conversation without talking about the integrated rail plan that was announced by government about 6 weeks or so ago. And clearly, as a region, and I know different parts of the region have slightly different views on HS2, but as a region, we were missed off the map in terms of HS2, and some real concerns about whether the feasibility of the enhancement to the East Coast Main Line that was set out in the integrated rail plan as well. The fact that the Northern Powerhouse Rail assumptions have been scaled back means that the key sort of aspiration to have a new Transpennine route which linked Bradford into Leeds and Hull, and linkages to Sheffield and beyond. We've lost, and that's a significant loss. The capacity of Leeds Station continues to be the determining factor, and no better example than that for the Wakefield district is platform 17. And platform 17 in itself is a major constraining factor on how the train service to the 5 towns works. And there's no real commitment to electrification other than a rather odd commitment between Leeds and Bradford, but not the rest of the Calder Valley line and not the rest of West Yorkshire. And so there are lots of things on the integrated rail plan that we in West Yorkshire feel disadvantaged the whole region. And as you may have seen in the press, there's been quite a lot of challenge back to government on that. Other things in the integrated rail plan that we really need to see the detail on before we understand it. Some commitment to mass transit in the region, but not clear in terms of how the funding is. The Transpennine route upgrade, which it was announced in the integrated rail plan. So that's a good thing, but we need to make sure that the scheme is the right scheme for our stations in West Yorkshire, and that we do get the benefit of that across the whole of the region, not just at the stations it serves. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, the East Coast Main Line, the faster journey times are written down, but you don't have to be a real expert to know that there's some real big challenges to delivering that, with some of the issues on the East Coast Main Line that constrain it. So generally disappointment around the integrated rail plan, and feeling that as a region we didn't do as well as other regions. So the Mayor and our Managing Director Ben Still have given evidence to the House of Commons Transport Select Committee on the IRP, and we're very much making the case that there needs to be some further work done and some further commitments for West Yorkshire that comes out of it. And there are several studies around the Leeds Station capacity, role of mass transit. There's a sort of open-ended commitment to bring HS2 trains into West Yorkshire, and so what and how is that, and how is this Leeds to Bradford electrification going to work in reality? So lots of questions that the integrated rail plan sets up, and lots of follow-on work that needs to be done around it. Demand responsive transport is something which was worth touching on here as well. We've with the money that came with the Leeds Public Transport Investment Programme, we have a what we call a flexible service in operation in East Leeds, and it sort of links to the taxi service in Hemsworth that I mentioned earlier. Very much a pilot, very much learning about sort of how to sort of create a different mode of transport on a shared minibus basis. And then we're also looking in about these things called mobility hubs, and we've done some work with Calderdale on that. And these are, take local towns, local centres. You could say Hemsworth could be one, where people come in on the bus, people drive in, people live locally. How do you actually create something in the centre of a little town like Hemsworth that actually means that enables people, particularly from the surrounding areas, to travel around better? And how do we sort of put the buses and where there is a rail station, the trains, the taxis, the cycle storage facilities, the shared car facilities, all of those things together to create these things called mobility hubs. So we've got some pilot schemes we're working on with that as well. So just from a Wakefield perspective, I just thought to share with you the schemes that are on site or about to be on site. The corridor scheme in Doncaster Road, car parks at Normanton Northoak, and UTMC is the Urban Traffic Management Centre, and that's very much about digitising the traffic signals and connecting them together. So a bit of a whistle-stop tour through quite a few issues and initiatives that are going on. So happy to stop for a minute and take any questions people have around that.
Yeah, Alan, can I come in on the with you, Dave? Two things: the Normanton Rail Park, which has been mooted for quite some time. One of my colleagues from the council at Normanton asked for an update on that, and I couldn't give him one because I didn't know what the situation was. But all I could indicate to him is the one at Outwood, where we have a situation where we were looking in terms of having the third extension to the car park in Outwood. And yet, obviously that stopped through COVID. And as the gentleman said, with people working from home, the commuter market is shrinking a little bit. But now we've got the site on the top end of the car park in Outwood Station of a little sort of pop-up, we buy any car. They're parking We Buy Any Cars up there, and there's a little porter cabin up there for We Buy Any Car. So I appreciate people's got to make the most of their situation, and any money coming in during the previous pandemic times has been better than none. But it's that integrated stuff that we need to concentrate on. You're right with everything. We do need to look long-term at freight, and we do need to look long-term of getting people off the road and an acceptable alternative. But the update on the Normanton Rail and the one at Outwood is be careful what you wish for, is what I'm saying, because you might get a car park made and it's franchised out to We Buy Any Car.
I'm not sure about the We Buy Any Car. I don't know whether Pete Myers from Northern's aware of that, but yeah,
I am, if you like. It is a short-term thing. It's making best use of resources while we got them. The car parks weren't full, and it was a pop-up thing. It can go as soon as it needs to go. And there's several of them actually all over the north.
Okay, thanks, Pete.
Could I just ask Dave, Newton Bar's timetable? I might be wrong, but I thought it was completed in 23.
All right, it might be. What does it say on there? The panel's gone there. Yeah, I think it is. I think you're probably right, actually. There.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a mistake because it's. Yeah.
But just a typo.
If that lists in chronological order, it's definitely a mistake. So yeah, we'll correct that. But yeah, I think that's right.
I think the Newton Bar roundabout situation was postponed at the start because we had it started late as well.
Yeah.
And there's been other things. I've been talking to Highways this week. We had a terrible fatal accident last week. We had another one last night. and so we were discussing speed limits and various different things that will be put in while they've got all the disruption to Newton Bar going off. But yeah, I think it's because it started maybe 2 or 3 months behind what it should have done. That's what's causing the overspill.
Okay. Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
any further questions on this?
Right, I'll move to the other one.
Thank you.
Right, and this is the last one, so so hopefully we'll keep this relatively quickly and open it for discussion, because it's really intended for a bit of a discussion, a conversation with you. And what we're sort of looking to do is really just talk about what next, really, in terms of public transport after the pandemic. The graphs on here, don't expect you to look at them in detail, but we'll forward the slides to you. The top one is local bus patronage. The middle one is people asking for information about local transport journeys, and the bottom one is Leeds Station footfall. And we've put them on here really to illustrate in the last 2 years how patronage and interest in public transport has moved. So obviously left-hand side, last couple of weeks in March, and that was what in a standard typical month in terms of people using public transport. It obviously dropped off the end of a cliff when the lockdown happened 2 years ago this week, and it sort of ebbed and flowed and went up and down with the various different stages of the pandemic. But as you see from the right-hand side, it's not where it used to be, and we've still got some way to go for it to be so. At the Combined Authority, we've been doing a series of telephone surveys in terms of what people's travel intentions are during the pandemic. And after the pandemic, and the latest one we did was last autumn, and I'll pick out a couple of key points to point out that on an average of the people we talked about, where people might have travelled to work 4 to 5 times a week, they're travelling about 3 times a week. So obviously that's reduced, and if we sort of work that through, we're looking at an overall reduction in commuting trips of around about 19-20%. And some of those won't come back because, as we know, more flexible working, more working from home, will mean that some people who go to workplaces won't necessarily go every day. And I think that's what these figures are telling us. The Transport Focus is a national organisation. It's the watchdog for the public transport industry, if you want to call it that. And they do quite a lot of survey work as well. I just thought I'd pick out some of their latest work as well, just to illustrate a few points. I think we've seen during the pandemic people feeling uncomfortable around public transport and around the risk of contagion on public transport. I think what this is telling us is most people actually use the service, are feeling a lot safer these days. So 90% of the people who use bus and train services, or over 90%, felt safe. They didn't feel at risk of catching COVID. But if you talk to the people who don't travel frequently, then fewer of those feel safe. So there's a real sort of perception issue to overcome. And across the piece, a third of people said they'll never feel completely comfortable using public transport in the future because its close proximity with others has made people very sensitive to that. So I think this is telling us is there's still a little bit of hesitancy around people using public transport as well. So just to summarise some of that and some of the things that people have said in this meeting earlier as well, is that people are returning to public transport. particularly since the restrictions were lifted, but we've got some way to go to getting back to 2019 levels. I think, as Pete said, weekend leisure journeys are coming back stronger than weekday commuting, and so it's quite clear that the use of public transport has changed a little bit, and that people are doing it for making sort of discretionary journeys in the leisure time rather than necessarily using it to go to and from work, and that has impacts on how and when services run, how ticketing schemes work, and that sort of thing. The change ways of working would suggest that there'll be a longer term impact on commuting, and it probably won't necessarily get back to the 2019 levels. And one of the other sort of bits of feedback we've had is that those people who are inclined to come to work places only so many times a week may not necessarily travel in the peak. They might just come back for a specific event or meeting or something like that, and so the demand isn't possibly going to be as peaky as it was. There's still some hesitancy around, as we've said, and people sensitive to overcrowding. And we've talked at length about the workforce issues, and the cost of living crisis. Again, it will have an impact on discretionary spending, and obviously that there's a fine line between the cost pressures which increase fares, but also the fact that the affordability of people to be able to pay those fares is a question. So that's a bit of a challenging situation. So we just wanted to share some of that with you, and just to throw some questions out for the last few minutes. Really, is thoughts on how you attract people back to public transport. How does public transport need to change? And what do we think people want in 10 years' time? So happy to have any thoughts people have got around that, either now or as a follow-on after the meeting. I think, Jeanette, if you could organise to send the slides out when we finish, then happy to get any comments back from people.
Will do. I'll do that. I'll send them out after the meeting.
Lovely, thank you.
Can I come in, please, if you don't mind? Hello?
Okay.
The situation regarding the buses in Durham where I live, there's no timetables about anywhere these days, so we don't know what time we've got to go on the internet to find out. And a lot of the old, especially, well, my generation, but I'm all right, but a lot of them don't know how to use the internet, don't know what to do. But the problem is that it's lack of information as to when the buses are running and where they're going to. Because I'll give you a prime example is that I live in Durham. If I want to get to the other end of up by Hollingthorpe, I've got to get a bus from where I live into Asda, change again, and get another bus back out again. Whereas before, you could get a bus directly there. And I've also noticed that with the buses, that they got the buses, the odd ones that run past my house, there's never any bugger on them. And I understand why they're going to cut back, but the problem is getting the information out to the general public as to when the buses are going to run and which way they're going to go. Because unless you know how to read all these things, a lot of people haven't got a clue. When it comes to the, sorry.
No, sorry, I was yeah, you finished and I'll
No, I'm just saying it does. Well, at one time when you went to a bus stop, there were a timetable up there, weren't there? Years ago.
There were.
There isn't now.
There were and there should be. That's one of the challenges we've had is bus services have changed so often over the last 2 years. Yeah. We quite honestly have not been able to keep up. And so because for various reasons, the bus service timetables were changing, partly due to some of the things we talked about earlier, but earlier in the pandemic, because literally there weren't many people travelling, the services were cut back accordingly, and then they were stepped back up again and then stepped back around again because we had another lockdown, etc., etc. So, at a point in 2020, we did actually take some of those timetables away because they were wrong, and so we put some sort of generic fillers out there. We're in the process of replacing them, but we're still having an awful lot of timetable changes. So yeah, the plan is to bring those bus timetables back to the bus stops. But it's taken a little bit longer than we would like to do that.
Another thing that I would like to raise, I know, was a situation when they shut the inquiry office up in Wakefield bus station, where you could get your bus passes from. And then there wasn't anything put in its place. Now, I've heard lots of rumours about where we can do it, but there's nothing been put in place to replace what was at the bus station in Wakefield for people getting the bus passes. You know, this is another problem that a lot of people were worried about, because, oh, you can do it on the internet. But again, have everybody got internet? This is the problem we have with the older generation, is that we're not technically that way inclined, if you understand what I mean. We're dinosaurs is the word I'm looking for. But this is the problem we've got, is there was nothing was put in when the actual station shut and they couldn't get your bus passes.
Yeah, I mean, you can get the bus pass on going through the website. We have encouraged people to help family and friends do that. We had the same problem at Dewsbury. We put an arrangement in with Kirklees Council at Dewsbury for people to be able to go to the town hall centre there to be able to order their bus pass. We're having some discussions with Wakefield Council to do something similar at Wakefield 1, so that there is somewhere to go for that. We do understand that issue. Interestingly, though, having done what we did at Dewsbury, we get very, very 4 or 5 people a week do it. So there are large numbers of people who go along to those sort of places to renew their bus pass. But yeah, it is unfortunate in terms of the closure of that office that there isn't a face-to-face place for anybody to go in Wakefield for bus pass, and we are talking to the council about putting that right.
Thank you.
Alan, thank you very much. I'm going to have to get off now, Alan, and thank you, Dave, and everybody who's participated today. It's a pleasure to work with you. Thank you very much. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Right, we've had a message from Melissa Farmer.
Hi there. Yes, I have returned. My apologies. I was on a train, off a train, in an area with no reception. All the challenges of, I think it's more challenging now when you're doing face-to-face and virtual. When it was all virtual, you could just stay in the same place, but not so easy now, because I've been in Manchester this morning. So my apologies that I've had to dip in and out. I assume, did Mr. Myers give an update from a northern perspective on?
He did, yes. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So probably, I'm guessing he will have said similar things to what I'm about to say. Just touching on current timetables, as you'll all be aware, we have been running reduced timetables since January, which we put into force as a result of the sickness levels we had at that time because of the Omicron variant. And we were starting to see a reduction in sickness, and it was certainly going in the right direction. But what we have seen in the last sort of 3 to 4 weeks is that sickness level amongst train crew is rising again. And probably from everybody's experience here, we probably all know somebody somewhere who's tested positive in the last few weeks, unfortunately. And I think we are just seeing that has resulted in that rise in absence levels again. The result of that, adding in that we're still got removal of rest day working, and we do still have a backlog of driver training, that we are still seeing that we have to have that reduced timetable in place. But similarly, and hopefully this will start to change in the coming weeks, with that further rise in sickness, we've had to, on top of the reductions, do some short notice cancellations. So putting them on, knowing the cancellations the evening before, posting them on the website, for the next day's services. Now, not an ideal situation to be in, because the reduced timetable, the whole point in that was that we wouldn't have to do that. But again, we do think it's better to do that, albeit the day before, rather than people turning up on the day to find, you know, the train that they're due to go for has been cancelled moments before. So that's sort of the situation at the moment with the timetables. As you'll all be aware as well, we've had now 6 Sundays of industrial action with our conductors, which again has seen even further reduced services and, you know, way down on what we would hope on Sundays. This is particularly affecting our leisure markets, which we were seeing, Pete probably touched on this, even Northern are seeing this, you know, the leisure market return was coming back strong. We saw that just before the Omicron variant back in sort of November, December. Then it took a dip again. But now having strikes on Sundays when people would like to be traveling for leisure, obviously that's restricting that. So that is disappointing. And we have had further dates announced that we'll see this Sunday again, the next 2 Sundays, and Saturdays and Sundays on Easter weekend, May Bank holiday and the Queen's Jubilee. So that'll be Saturday and Sunday. So again, still working as an organisation with the unions on this, but it's yet to be resolved. And so we do have these additional dates. So that's really a sort of quick update from me. If anybody's got any questions or anything that they think I've not touched on, just give me a shout.
Any questions for Melissa?
Hello, hi. Okay.
No? Is that Cliff Barker wanted to say something?
No.
Oh.
No.
I just saw your hand moving.
Yeah.
Okay, if anybody's got any questions later, feel free to just drop me an email. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe that concludes our business.
It does, yes.
And
Thanks,
the last
everyone.
one, maybe.
Yeah.
Killed it.
Thank you.
To return better and stronger.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Keep safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.